children, and rightfully so. And whatever it was to move the federal Congress and hopefully this committee to see, is there something more we can do? Now, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't just happen in Columbine. It happens every single day somewhere. I want to share with you why I feel pretty strong. 37 years ago, next month, in Baltimore City, the city hall was being redecorated and remodeled. And so they moved the city council people and the mayor over to an office on Calvert Street. And an individual in Baltimore, upset with the health department, wanted to protest. And he came with a gun into temporary city hall and wanted to search out for Mayor Schaefer. Happily, one of the aides was able to steer him away from Schaefer's office, but into the office of the city council people. And this gentleman ended up shooting and killing Dominic Leone, a wonderful person, injuring Carol Fitzgerald, and shooting at my father, who in distress had a heart attack and died months later. So that's kind of personal to me, to be aware that in a government office a person can come in with a gun and shoot people. Now, in the trial of Mr. Hopkins, it was determined that he was found to be not guilty by reason of insanity, because that's the what you could raise back at that time. Now it's not criminally responsible, but anyway, because of a mental defect or a mental illness, he was spared a sanction in the penitentiary. He later, in the sentencing, went to Perkins. He spent a long, long time in Perkins, and is still today, 37 years later, in custody. So, you know, I'm relieved that he's not able to do anything else with someone else, but that was always personal to me. And so I can sympathize with the Columbine parents, but as the chief had mentioned, there's another number that you should consider, and government could consider. Every single year, there's about 100,000 persons in America who are injured by or fatally suffer death by firearms. 100,000 times a year. Not just some school children at Virginia Tech, not just a city councilman in Baltimore City, but 100,000 times a year. Now, I don't want to mislead you. Of that 100,000, back when I did the report, Farewell to Arms, in 1999, we concluded that about half of those 100,000 involved, not half, but about 30,000 of the 100,000, 30,000 times a year, there is a death by firearms, half of which are homicides, half of which are suicides, and in between there's a few that are accidental. So this is a big number. Now, in addition to that 30,000 fatal homicide or suicide, there's another 75,000 people who are injured by handguns when there's an intent to harm that individual.
Period, hands down. Just so you know, back in March of 2010, an intruder broke into a Perryville home in Lyon County, Baltimore County, and a resident, William Bozeman, was confronted. The homeowner, Mr. Bozeman, when confronted with a handgun, reached under his mattress, pulled out his own handgun, and shot and killed the intruder. Within 14 days, I not only declared that Mr. Bozeman should not be charged with any form of homicide, but we ruled quickly that, in fact, everything that he did was right and lawful under Maryland law. The gun laws proposed today that you see before you from the administration would do nothing to change the rights of that gun owner to have that handgun and to defend himself and his property. Somewhere between what Mr. Bozeman did and a gunman walking into an elementary school with a high-capacity magazine on an assault rifle, who then decides to gun down 20 innocent 7-year-olds. Somewhere between those two things, we should all be able to agree that there can be reasonable lines drawn that balance the right of gun owners versus the rights of those of us to be safe in the area of the public safety. We all agree that in the area of the First Amendment, right now, I have no right to shout fire in a crowded movie theater. We agree that that is a reasonable restriction on the First Amendment. We can also agree that the right to freedom of the press does not include the right to publish knowing falsehoods about a person in a newspaper. We can all agree that we have a right to reasonable restrictions of both freedom of the press and freedom of speech.
O'Malley's laughing.
Why not, then, can we not all agree that some logical restrictions can be put in place on the use and possession of guns when it comes to public safety? Take the case of Robert Gladden, who walked into Perry Hall High School in my jurisdiction on the first day of classes just last year, September of 2012. He carried with him an older model shotgun. He was able to get off a shot at an innocent student before he was contained by some very courageous school staff who were able to stop him before the second shot hurt anyone else. He had 19 more shotgun shells in his pocket that he intended to use, continuing to reload and shoot as many students as he could. He did not have the chance to do this before he was subdued. Had Robert Gladden had a weapon like Adam Lanza did in Newtown, the outcome in Baltimore County would have been far worse. Magazine capacity does make a difference. In fact, even in this case, Gladden's stepfather had a 9mm at home that had a 10-round capacity magazine that was fully loaded, that he told the police he wanted to get to, but fortunately the stepfather had locked it away. And that's why gun safety training is very important. He wanted that higher capacity weapon, but was stuck with an antique 2-shot shotgun, and because of that, it made a difference in this case. And that's why magazine capacity and access to assault weapons makes such a difference. I would like to quickly read to you from a Supreme Court case, and you may all be surprised at who the author is when I finish. Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. From Blackstone through 19th century cases, commentators and courts routinely explain that the right was not a right to keep any weapon or carry it in any manner whatsoever for any purpose. Although we do not take a historical analysis, the full scope of the Second Amendment, nothing in the opinion here today should be taken to cast doubt on the long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons. It doesn't stop us from making people who are mentally ill from not possessing weapons, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, or laws imposing conditions and the qualifications for purchasing firearms. We also recognize another important limitation. The sorts of weapons protected by the Second Amendment are those that were in common use at the time. We think that limitation is fairly supported by the historical reading of prohibiting carrying dangerous and unusual weapons. That was Justice Scalia in the Heller decision. The Heller decision in which he struck down D.C. laws, but acknowledged that reasonable restrictions are still permissible under the Second Amendment, and that was taken right from the Justice's majority opinion. Assault weapons bans and high magazine capacity limitations can limit carnage, just as it did at the Perry Hall situation. Requiring fingerprints prior to purchasing a handgun and making folks go through gun safety training can stop straw purchases. The classes in which girlfriends and loved ones will not want to attend 8 hours or even 4 hours or put their fingerprints down for police officers. We'll prevent straw